Too many of you just said, "Where's the popcorn?" So I'm sorry about that. Didn't want to, breakfast popcorn. I don't know what the flavors would be, but want to welcome you. Bacon. Ooh, okay. We could stop by the parish on the way here. I want to welcome you. My name's Jake. If you're new, just super glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. And as you might have already guessed, today is a little bit of a different kind of day for us here at Aldea, maybe even a little strange. And then I was thinking about it, and I was thinking everything we do at Aldea is kind of different. So that's it's normal for us to be abnormal. But yes, today is a very unique day for us. I'm personally very excited about it. Last week, we shared in our message, and towards the end of the message, I just said, if you have a movie that is meaningful to you, that has been spiritually impactful, that maybe challenged you, changed the way you thought about something, or maybe you feel seen in a particular film. And we just wanted to hear about your experiences, and the responses this week were incredible. And so I have already been able to dive into all the things that you shared, and I'm so excited to bring that to everyone today. It is Oscar Sunday today. Some of you are like, "Oh, thanks for reminding me, Jake." It's interesting. It's also Festival of Books here in Tucson, and you might be thinking it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. You're going for movies when it's a book weekend. And I was thinking about it, with our short, dwindling attention spans in this modern era, if you can get through a movie without checking your phone, I consider that reading a book, so. But, it's interesting because obviously, something like the Oscars, you might be out there and you might think, well, isn't that kind of vain? Aren't they celebrating the wrong things with an event like that? And then with so much going on in our world, how can we be taking a week talking about movies? And I totally get that. Last week, we finished up our series, The Good, the True, and the Beautiful. And as we talked about the beautiful dimension of life and of the human experience, we talked about how things like nature or things like art connect us to this deeper dimension of the human soul. They remind us what life is all about. We shared the example last week that, there was a group of people who snuck a copy of Ratatouille into Gaza, risking their own lives to bring some joy and some beauty to some children there. And then something very similar happened in a refugee camp in Jordan. And really, it's just to remind us that things like film can really impact us on such a deep level, bring joy, remind us of some of the universals of the human experience. And these are essential things, I really do believe, because art can be incredibly transformative. I know film, I believe, is incredibly universal. Just when we played that intro, it just dawned on me, like, universal. Oh, it's universal. But I really do. I think film transcends generation. It transcends culture. I mean, to not connect to film, no offense, but I think you'd have to be a sea sponge, and technically alive, but no nervous system, So I could get up here and I could talk for probably 3 days straight on what I think the connection between film and spirituality is. But I know probably most of you don't have 3 days to spare. If you do, we can, figure something out. But I do just want to share a couple of things about why I think film is deep and spiritual and impactful before we jump into your responses. Film allows us to engage with empathy on a deep level. Movies put us into other people's shoes, other places, other times. The great movie critic Roger Ebert once said, "Movies are empathy machines. The great movies expand our hearts." I think a big part of this is that movies transport us. Maybe it's just for a couple hours we can kind of lose ourselves in a movie. Do you ever have this experience where, especially this is true in a movie theater, the credits roll and you're like, "Oh, that's right, I'm Jake," I forgot about my life. But it can be a beautiful thing. This was certainly important for, if you think about 100 years ago when films were kind of first entering the public sphere, difficult times in our country, Great Depression, people needed a place they could go and they could escape. And with summer coming, right, maybe a little sooner than we would like, movies again are a great place for us to escape. But more than that, movies help us feel. They help us connect to emotions, maybe that we wouldn't access other than when they're portrayed in a unique way in a story. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm someone where I actually cry more in movies than I do mostly in every other area of my life. I don't know. I'm a movie crier. I don't know if anyone else does that, but I find that it can help me access certain things in my heart. And I think this is an aspect of humanity. It's been a part of our lives for thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of years. Certainly not movies, right? But the idea of telling stories across a variety of mediums as a way to connect with the universal human experience. And then you have movies, which is a particular medium very specific to our time, if you think about it. And it's a medium that in many ways combines other forms of art to create something really magnificent, right? It's a combination of the visual, the photography of it all, the audio, whether it be the music and the sound, there's the performance, there's the writing of the story. And then, of course, there's all these other categories of things that come together to make the movie possible. Categories that you probably fast forward through when you're watching the Oscars, right? Like set design and costume design, all that stuff. But it all comes together to make something really extraordinary. And I know that it's one of the ways that we as humans connect to each other, right? Like, how many of you have had a really deep conversation with someone about your favorite movies? And it's how you learn about people. It's a good first date question, right? It might be the last date based on the answer. But it's so important for us to kind of use that as a template. We can learn about what movies mean to you, what movies helped you feel seen in the world, what lessons were taught to you through movies. Someone was talking to me this morning about how, we speak in movie quotes often, right? And so it's a powerful way for us to connect with each other. And so we're going to connect as a community right now and learning about the movies that impacted you and all of us out there. And my hope is this, as we go through this amazing list, that even if there's stuff here that you haven't seen or maybe you didn't like, that what would emerge is this understanding that we have this amazing connection to art and how the human experience is displayed through film, and we see ourselves reflected on the screen again and again and again. So with that, I think it's just important to remind you, there's going to be a little bit of spoilers. I'm sorry. Some of these movies you've had 80 years, but there are going to be a couple of spoilers. And I apologize in advance. And also, I can't I'm not recommending all of these movies. I haven't screened them all. I'm sure some of them have things that I can't, actually recommend. If I had screened them all, that would have made for a crazy week, as you're about to see. But I just want to give those disclaimers. We're going to jump into the movies that were impactful to you. And I want to start with movies that maybe it wasn't necessarily just the movie, but it was the experience around watching it that was impactful. Like, how many of us, you have a movie where it might not be your favorite movie, but you remember exactly where you were when you saw it, who you saw it with, and that was what was impactful. So Michael writes, Casablanca, 1942. I first saw this film as a child with my favorite aunt. I think I know most of the dialogue by heart. I became determined to see the world and seeing La Marseille in North Africa someday. He also writes, Stand By Me. I saw this film with some at-risk kids in a juvenile correction center in Catalina. The discussion with these young men after the film changed all of our lives. Right? How many of us have had some version of an experience like these, where just the moment, the circumstances of watching the movie was the impact? Sometimes it's the message. Sometimes movies, I think all the time, they carry this message with it. And sometimes it's really intentional, what message that you're receiving. But then there are times where the message might feel like it's just for us. It's something we picked out. Someone else might have not gotten the exact same thing. But I think this can be just as powerful. So here are some of the messages that really impacted you. Cheryl writes, The Shawshank Redemption. I would like to submit the movie Shawshank Redemption, a film that contained spiritual messages for me. In spite of dire circumstances, hope was kept alive through perseverance, friendship, and a basic premise that freedom can be internal. Even though the men were convicted criminals, they had a sense of integrity in their relationships with one another. Andy's companionship and patience are transforming to many of the other inmates, especially Red. The movie's theme, get busy living or get busy dying, suggests positive action, resilience, and again, perseverance. Edith writes, Soul. Soul explores the great before and the great after in relaying the message that the meaning of life is that meaning comes from living and our experiences. Goals and passions, achievements, etc. do not define our value. Truly living is to experience and appreciate the small joys along the way. We may not have a single purpose to our life except to know that it is a gift to be alive. There is no big purpose to my life and never was. I am here to be alive and to help others do the same. Scratch achievements and goals and sink into that piece of pizza. Sarah writes, Lady in the Water. This is one of my favorites. She says, this mystical story reminded me in a way that I have returned to again and again, that there is a role for each of us to fill in each of the dramas of our lives. If I get mixed up and try to fill the role that isn't mine, then I am likely blocking another person from where they are most useful, as well as being unable to accomplish what I'm trying to do. The story turns out best when each of us is in our own individual role, and we are also all working together as a team. And then the beautiful lady is safely back to her mystical realm underwater. Sorry, spoilers, but... Bill shares Mind Walk. This is one of the few that I had never heard of before, so thank you, Bill, for the suggestion. I think I'm going to watch this one now. He says, this 1990 film kind of blew my mind, or should I say opened it. For me, it began to explain spirituality in the language of science. It talked about the larger universe outside of us and the inward universe of electrons and molecules inside of us, and how relationships between everything and matter is what it's really all about. It also explores the difficulties of restructuring current social systems around our current knowledge. A politician, a physicist, and a poet discuss the complexities of joining science and societal norms while they walk around a castle in France. Robbie shared Dead Man Walking. This film demonstrated that even those who have committed the most despicable acts are worthy as human beings. It was very easy for me to hate the characters because of their violent and vile acts. Yet the film helped me realize that no matter our faults or debased actions, all are children of the Creator, and we are worthy of forgiveness and love. Richard shared Gran Torino. He says, it is spiritually powerful because it follows the late life transformation of Walt Kowalski, a hardened, isolated man who slowly awakens to compassion and purpose through his relationship with his Hmong neighbors. As Walt moves from prejudice to empathy and from anger to service, the film reveals how grace can break through even the toughest exterior. His final act, choosing nonviolent sacrifice over retaliation, becomes a profound expression of redemption, breaking a cycle of harm and showing that true strength often looks like humility, protection, and love. The story invites reflection on forgiveness, community, and the possibility of becoming better than our past. Connie submits Schindler's List. She writes anger, hope, and compassion. That was what impacted her. And I find it fascinating, personally, this is me talking, that we, there are multiple films on this list that are either World War II based or, in many ways, genre could be Holocaust. And I find it's so poignant that, we go through things as a collective that are so hard to process, so massive to contend with, that film art can be a way for us to connect, right? That we need story and narrative, that something is so massive that we need it made personal in order for us to sometimes process through aspects of it. So I think that this is where film can be really powerful for us as a culture. And another example of this is Life is Beautiful. Sheila writes, Life is Beautiful begins as a romantic love story and becomes a powerful tale of survival. It shows a father's selfless devotion, sacrifice, and courage in the face of overwhelming hatred and power. Against the machinery of cruelty, one ordinary man uses love to protect his child. Though he dies, his love triumphs and his purpose is fulfilled. The arc and culmination of this story echoes the life and death of Jesus. Sorry for the spoilers there, but switching gears a little bit, Idina writes, The Nightmare Before Christmas. I was actually shocked when I found out saw the year of this one, because I was born that year, so I don't know if this movie predates me even. Idina writes, The Nightmare Before Christmas is a story of resurrection where a god, Jack Skellington, is frustrated with his role as the Pumpkin King in the realm of Halloween Town. So he descends into the woods and discovers a new world that inspires and delights him, Christmas Town. Jack is so charmed by this new world, he decides he will incarnate into our earthly plane as Santa Claus and make Christmas even better. This plan goes terribly awry. He is so despised by the people he set out to bless with his magic that the military shoots him out of his sleigh in the sky. He crashes down into a graveyard where he sings a song lamenting all that has forsaken him. Jack realizes he was wrong trying to pose as something he is not, and sees that he doesn't need to change dramatically to make himself or his life better. He, in fact, was always perfect. The importance of his journey was to try something new and fail at it. Anyone getting maybe this could be about me today. As a god, it's next to impossible to fail in his own realm, but journeying away from what is comfortable and familiar allowed him to gain the wisdom and humility of knowing his own limits and the sometimes terrifying potential of his powers. I don't think it's a coincidence that he lands in a graveyard. All Jack has to do is look around. He has landed exactly where he's meant to be because he's a skeleton and the king of Halloween, which is a death holiday. You get it. After he gets over feeling sorry for himself, he enters a tomb and returns to Halloween Town, reinvigorated to fulfill his destiny by making the next Halloween the most frightful yet. This movie, like all resurrection stories, is a reminder that we don't always have to strive for greatness because we are already perfect the way we are. And if we try something new and fail, we'll still land exactly where we are meant to be, with a whole new perspective and invaluable wisdom to take us through whatever comes next. Now, though it's not a competition, the Oscar for greatest film analysis today goes to Idina. So I think Idina's going to be here second service, so I'll pass on the claps. But notice for a moment that there are some certain stark differences film to film, and yet there are similarities among them all. Notice how impactful they are to each of the writers. Notice how a movie might not be your thing, and yet it can still be powerful to hear what it meant to someone else. I want to switch gears a little bit now, and we're going to move from movies that carried a message to movies that the person who submitted this, it let them feel seen. It was about the representation. Maybe a movie that showed a character on screen and there was a nature or an aspect of the character that was really special. So Ariel writes, Harry Potter. Growing up in a household where I felt like an outcast, being constantly punished and neglected, I found solace in the film Harry Potter. I could relate to Harry and his family struggles, dreams to love more than the life he lived, and find solace and love through friendships and academics. Whenever I watch this film, I'm reminded of the magical power of friendship and love. Dylan writes, Dylan, whose birthday was yesterday, by the way, happy birthday, Dylan. Dylan writes, of Rocky Horror Picture Show. While clearly not a spiritual film, That's your words, Dylan, not me. I would argue that cult classics are generally spiritual experiences for those who dive deep into them. Rocky Horror Picture Show is, for sure, not deeply spiritual, but gosh, did it have an impact on me. I've always felt different from my peers and others around me. I didn't feel shame per se, but I couldn't understand what made me feel so alien. And then when I was 14, I saw Rocky Horror Picture Show and I felt seen. I felt connected to the alien figure Frank, and I felt less alone. The movie itself helped me realize that everyone is different and that there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a good thing. Without the experience with these alien figures, our heroes would never go through a real transformation into deep understanding. But more importantly than the movie was the community I found through this cult phenomenon. This was before I came out, which, for the record, Rent was another impactful film. We'll get to that in a second. So the Rocky Horror Picture Show community was the first time I felt deeply connected to others. Despite being the most introverted, I went to the midnight showings in full costume, and I even joined one of the performing troops. So though not inherently a spiritual film, it's been a spiritual experience for me. Don't just dream it, be it. I would add that as a young queer kid in a small town, seeing Rent in theaters also changed my life. My only real exposure to queerness prior to that was Ellen DeGeneres, and that representation didn't resonate with me. Rent showed so many portrayals of queerness and helped me realize that there is no right way to be queer or just human. It really helped me feel more comfortable in my skin, in my identity. Measure in love, period. Well done. 525. No, just kidding. Scott submits Charlie, and he writes compassion. And you know, I was thinking, Charlie is an historic movie for its centering of a neurodivergent character. Probably the first, I know this was the first Oscar winner for a character, playing a character that was neurodivergent. On kind of that same line, on the topic of neurodivergence, Suzanne submits Forrest Gump. She writes, because of his enthusiasm for life, participating in anti-war counterculture movement, as I did in the 70s. Also, I loved he met JFK, who was one of my heroes as well. I have worked with developmentally delayed adults and found them to be some of the most heartfelt and kind humans. And this movie is about dealing with the loss of loved ones, as I have, losing my mom and best friend just 2 years ago. Life is like a box of chocolates. You for sure never know what you're going to get. Edith submits Whale Rider. This story from Maori culture explores spirituality in every moment. The relationship between people, other living creatures, and nature is meant to be the basis of our living as the tribe and Pi, the main character, face modern issues versus historical values. Divine intervention is achieved by calling on ancient ancestors and their wisdom. In early Maori culture, there was one world, physical and spiritual domains as one entity. Current challenges lean toward preserving ancestral identity, compassion for and with nature, and spiritual traditions that define tribal leadership values. I love learning about other cultures and their spiritual beliefs. The reality of rituals to maintain and support spirituality is appealing to me, as it seems I have had so little of this on my personal spiritual journey. The power of nature as a spiritual force is compelling in this film. Okay, we're going to do just a couple that came in on the later side, or maybe not as much info was shared with these, but I want to still do some honorable mentions. So we're going to do a bit of a rapid fire round. LaDonna submits The Matrix. Sophia submits The Last Unicorn. David shared Hamnet. I know, a big one for this year's Oscars. Larry mentions The Concert for George, a celebration of the life and music of George Harrison. Maybe more of a music thing, but I'll allow it, Larry. John shares The Great Ecstasy of Woodcarver Steiner, and Robin, The Way. You guys okay if I do one now? All right, thank you. So last week, when I mentioned that we were going to be doing this, I had shared, let us know your favorite movies. And someone came up to me and they said, I know what you're going to do. I know which movie you're going to pick. And I have a lot of favorite movies. So I thought, I don't know what movie I'm going to do. So please tell me. That might be helpful to me. They said to me, well, you're going to, of course, do Lord of the Rings because you always use Lord of the Rings as an illustration in your messages. And that was news to me. So I thought, but I do love Lord of the Rings. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to trust it. And so I thought I would pick my favorite Lord of the Rings movie, which is the second Lord of the Rings movie, The Two Towers. What I find really powerful about this movie is it doesn't have that joyful coming together of the first movie, nor does it have the glorious resolution of the third movie. It's often bleak. There's often moments where it's difficult to have hope, moments where it feels like all is lost. There is a lot unresolved in this movie, even by the end. And yet, the main characters keep going. They don't give up. And in some ways, in this film, dawn does come. And for me, I'm just reminded of us and what you might be going through in your life, certainly, but also what we're facing as a globe, as a collective, that so often it feels like we are up against insurmountable odds, and it feels like it can be difficult to hope. But there's so much I love in this movie, and there's a clip I want to show from this movie that I think really captures this idea of why we keep going. I think if you take the words that are being said in this clip and you transpose it onto what so many of us are feeling about the time that we're in, I think it works perfectly. And I think it also just reminds us of the power of stories and how stories are how we keep hope alive. If you think about mostly every movie that we've shared so far, they've been about overcoming or about hope or about courage or about bringing light into darkness. So I'm gonna share this clip and hopefully it resonates with you.
It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
I guess after that I'm realizing Sam is the associate pastor at Aldea, you know? Well, I just want to share a couple of things before we close. One, I would invite you to notice the relationship between the universal truths of each of these movies and yet the particulars. See, there's this interesting interaction where when communicating something universal about the human experience, often we find it deep in the particulars of specific characters doing specific things at a specific time and place, right? So it's a bit of a paradox, because sometimes the more we dig into the specifics, the more universal the truth. And I find that this is so powerful when we think about the mirrors that we all are for each other, right? That we all see ourselves in each other, not in spite of, but because of the uniquenesses, but because of our specifics and our particulars. So really my encouragement on this would be, tell your story, be you, and recognize that in the uniqueness and in the particulars of your story, there are so many are going to find deep universal truths. We also could see that what we watch has a beautiful and profound effect on us. What we watch changes us, challenges us. It allows us to feel seen. It teaches us things. And so if film, and really art in general, if these are examples of empathy machines, then let us use them to allow us as tools to help us connect, right? If movies help you feel, then use movies to allow you to feel the things that you need to feel. That is one of the beautiful gifts of art. And lastly, I think we learned that you don't need to agree with everything about a film to feel what it means for someone, right? You don't need to like everything about a movie to recognize that it was meaningful to someone else or is meaningful to the people who created it. I think this is a very Aldea-esque awareness, because we're in a community where we don't believe all the same things. We have very different life experiences, spiritual backgrounds, and yet we can come together and resonate with the truth in the way that it finds each of us in its uniqueness, right? And so we experience the common humanity not by being identical, not necessarily even by agreeing with each other fully, but by deeply resonating and holding that space. And I think that that can be true in appreciating the way that film shows up in all of our lives. Werner Herzog, the great director, once said, film is a window into the soul of humanity. I think after today, for me, I'm encouraged that the soul of humanity is still courageous, that the soul of humanity is still hopeful, that the soul of humanity is full of love and resilience and compassion, and that perhaps this collective soul of humanity, through things like art, through the good, the beautiful, and the true, perhaps the soul of humanity is still expanding.